Have you ever noticed how reaching 60 changes everything about your family relationships? Suddenly, the relatives who once seemed merely annoying become sources of genuine stress and exhaustion. You find yourself questioning whether blood really is thicker than water when that blood seems determined to drain your peace and energy. The comfortable illusions about family loyalty begin to crack, revealing uncomfortable truths that younger people often choose to ignore. Your time becomes precious in a way it never was before, and you start asking yourself why you're spending it on people who consistently leave you feeling worse. Life after 60 should be about wisdom, dignity, and the hard-earned right to choose your battles carefully. The truth is, some family members become more toxic as they age, not less, and they often target the seniors in their lives as easy marks for manipulation and control. You might find yourself dealing with relatives who see your accumulated assets as their inheritance opportunity, or who treat your decades of experience as irrelevant, outdated thinking. Perhaps you're facing family members who disguise their need to control as concern for your well-being, slowly chipping away at your confidence and independence. Maybe you're exhausted by relatives who turn every family gathering into their personal therapy session, demanding emotional labor you no longer have the energy to provide. These patterns aren't just annoying quirks or personality differences, they're genuine threats to your mental health and quality of life. What makes this particularly challenging is that society expects you to tolerate toxic behavior simply because it comes from family members. You're told to be patient, understanding, and forgiving, as if your emotional well-being matters less than maintaining the appearance of family harmony. The guilt can be overwhelming when you start setting boundaries or limiting contact with relatives who consistently bring chaos into your carefully cultivated peace. You might worry about what others will think or feel selfish for prioritizing your own mental health over family obligations. But here's what nobody tells you about aging gracefully. It requires the courage to protect yourself from people who diminish your worth, regardless of their relationship to you. The good news is that you're not powerless in these situations, and learning to identify toxic family patterns is the first step toward reclaiming your peace. There are specific types of toxic relatives who commonly target seniors, and once you understand their tactics, you can develop strategies to protect yourself. You don't have to choose between family connection and personal well-being. There are ways to maintain your dignity while setting appropriate boundaries. The wisdom that comes with age includes knowing when to walk away from relationships that no longer serve you, even when those relationships share your DNA. Your golden years should be golden, not tarnished by people who refuse to respect the person you've become. Understanding these toxic patterns isn't about becoming cynical or cutting off everyone who occasionally annoys you. It's about recognizing the difference between normal family friction and genuinely harmful behavior. Some relatives will always challenge you, push your buttons, or have different opinions, and that's perfectly normal in any family dynamic. But there's a clear line between occasional conflict and systematic manipulation, control, or emotional abuse that targets your age and perceived vulnerability. Learning to see this distinction clearly will help you respond appropriately to different situations and preserve your energy for relationships that truly matter. If you're finding value in this perspective, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more wisdom on navigating life's later chapters with grace and strength. To help you see this more clearly, I want to tell you a story about two seniors who faced exactly these challenges and learned to protect themselves from the toxic relatives in their lives. Cassandra, a vibrant 68-year-old woman, had been looking forward to her weekly community center gathering all week, seeing it as a peaceful refuge where she could connect with friends and enjoy activities that brought her joy. She arrived that Thursday afternoon with a light heart, ready to participate in the book discussion and perhaps try the new watercolor class that had been added to the schedule. The community center had become her sanctuary, a place where she felt valued and appreciated for who she was, not what she could provide to others. But as she approached the refreshment table to pour herself a cup of coffee, she noticed a familiar figure that immediately changed the atmosphere of her afternoon. Her nephew Blake had somehow discovered her routine and was waiting for her near the cookies and punch, wearing the same manipulative smile she'd learned to recognize over the years. Blake approached Cassandra with the calculated casualness of someone who had rehearsed this encounter multiple times in his mind. "Aunt Cassie," he called out, using the childhood nickname that always made her feel slightly uncomfortable coming from his adult mouth. "What a wonderful surprise seeing you here. I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by to see how you're doing." Cassandra knew immediately that this wasn't a coincidence. Blake lived 40 minutes away and had never shown interest in her weekly activities before. She could see the tension in his shoulders and the slight desperation behind his practiced smile. "Hello, Blake," she replied cautiously, setting down her coffee cup and preparing herself for whatever was coming next. "You look fantastic, Aunt Cassie. Really you do. You know, I was just telling my wife the other day how grateful I am for everything you did for me when I was growing up." Blake's voice carried that familiar tone of manufactured warmth that preceded his most manipulative moments. Cassandra remembered the countless times she had picked him up from school when his parents were working, the birthday parties she had hosted, the Christmas presents she had carefully chosen. Those memories had once brought her joy, but now they felt weaponized, turned into ammunition for Blake's endless requests. "Do you remember that time when I was 12 and you took me to the Science Museum? That trip changed my whole perspective on learning. You were like a second mother to me." The compliment felt hollow, designed to soften her defenses rather than express genuine gratitude. Cassandra nodded politely, but she could feel her stomach tightening with anticipation. Blake never brought up childhood memories unless he wanted something significant. "That's very kind of you to remember, Blake. How are things going with your work?" She hoped to redirect the conversation toward neutral territory, but Blake seized the opening like a predator spotting wounded prey. "Well, that's actually something I wanted to talk to you about. Things have been challenging lately, and I could really use some family support." His voice dropped to a more intimate tone, as if they were sharing a secret. "You know how much I've always looked up to you, Aunt Cassie. You've always been so wise with money, so successful in everything you do." Blake glanced around the community center, making sure other people could see them talking, then leaned closer to Cassandra. "I've been working on this incredible business opportunity, something that could really set my family up for the future. It's a restaurant concept that I've been developing with some partners, and we're so close to making it happen." Cassandra had heard variations of this story before. Blake had pitched her on a food truck venture 3 years ago, a catering business 2 years before that, and some kind of online delivery service the year before. Each opportunity had been described as incredible and can't miss, and each had quietly disappeared when Blake moved on to his next scheme. "The thing is, we just need a small investment to get everything started. Nothing huge, just enough to cover the initial equipment and licensing fees." "How much are we talking about, Blake?" Cassandra asked, though she already suspected the answer would be anything but small. Blake's definition of reasonable amounts had grown steadily over the years, along with his sense of entitlement to her money. "Well, we're looking at about $15,000. I know that sounds like a lot, but think about it as an investment in your nephew's future, in our family's future." $15,000 was not a small amount by any measure, and Cassandra felt her blood pressure rising at Blake's casual dismissal of such a significant sum. "Blake, that's a considerable amount of money. I'd need to think about something like that very carefully." Blake's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. But Cassandra caught the flash of irritation that crossed his features before he composed himself again. Of course. I completely understand. It's just that the opportunity won't be available much longer, and I'd hate for us to miss out because we waited too long. The pressure tactic was subtle but unmistakable. Blake was trying to create urgency where none existed, forcing her to make a decision before she could think it through properly. You know, Aunt Cassie, I've been thinking a lot about family lately, about how important it is to support each other, especially when someone has the means to really make a difference in their loved ones' lives. Blake, I need to be honest with you, Cassandra began, choosing her words carefully. I've worked very hard for my financial security, and I'm not in a position to make large investments in ventures that I don't fully understand. She tried to keep her voice gentle but firm, hoping to end the conversation without causing a scene. Blake's face darkened slightly, and she could see him calculating his next approach. I understand that you have to be careful with your money, Aunt Cassie. I really do. But this isn't just about money. This is about family. This is about believing in the people who love you. Blake's voice grew slightly louder, and Cassandra became aware that other seniors in the community center were beginning to glance in their direction. I mean, I'm not asking for charity here. I'm offering you a chance to be part of something amazing. But if you don't believe in me, if you don't think I'm worth investing in after everything we've been through together, then I guess I understand. The guilt manipulation was now in full swing, and Cassandra felt the familiar weight of childhood conditioning telling her to give in, to avoid conflict, to prioritize Blake's feelings over her own financial security. It's not about not believing in you, Blake, Cassandra replied, her voice remaining steady despite the emotional pressure. It's about making responsible decisions with my money. I've learned that mixing family relationships with business ventures rarely ends well for anyone involved. Blake's mask slipped further, revealing the frustration and anger beneath his practiced charm. Responsible decisions. Aunt Cassie, you live in a nice house. You have a comfortable retirement. You come to places like this for fun. You have more than enough to help family members who are struggling. The accusation stung because it was designed to. Blake was attempting to shame her for her financial security, as if having worked and saved for decades was somehow selfish. I've earned my financial security through years of careful planning and hard work, Blake. That doesn't mean I owe it to anyone else, even family members. Cassandra's voice carried a new edge of firmness that seemed to surprise Blake. He had expected her to crumble under the guilt pressure, to apologize for having money while he struggled with his latest failed venture. Wow, Blake said, his voice carrying a note of theatrical disappointment that was clearly intended for the other seniors, who were now openly watching their conversation. I never thought I'd see the day when my own aunt would be so selfish with her money. After everything our family has been through together, after all the help you've given me over the years, I thought you'd want to see me succeed. The word selfish hung in the air like an accusation, and Cassandra could feel the eyes of her friends on her, wondering what kind of person would refuse to help their own nephew. At that moment, another familiar figure approached their table. Jade, Cassandra's sister-in-law, had arrived for her own weekly visit to the community center, though she rarely participated in activities and seemed to come mainly to check up on Cassandra's social life. Cassandra, dear, how are you today? Jade's greeting carried the same artificial sweetness that Blake had been using, but with an additional layer of condescension that made Cassandra's skin crawl. I see you're having a family meeting. How lovely. Jade pulled up a chair without being invited and settled herself at their table as if she belonged there. Hello, Jade, Cassandra replied, her heart sinking as she realized that one difficult conversation was about to become two. Jade had a talent for making every interaction feel like an interrogation disguised as concern. Blake was just telling me about his latest business venture. Cassandra hoped to keep the conversation brief and factual, but Jade immediately seized on the opportunity to insert herself into the situation. "Oh, how exciting! Blake, you've always been so entrepreneurial. Cassandra, isn't it wonderful to see young people with such ambition?" Jade's comment was seemingly supportive of Blake, but Cassandra caught the subtle implication that she should be more encouraging of her nephew's schemes. "Of course, Cassandra, you've always been so cautious with money. Sometimes I worry that you're almost too careful, if you know what I mean." The criticism was delivered with a smile, but it was criticism nonetheless, designed to undermine Cassandra's confidence in her own financial judgment. Blake perked up at this unexpected support from Jade. "Exactly. That's what I was trying to explain. Sometimes you have to take risks to help family members achieve their dreams." Jade nodded approvingly, as if Blake had said something profoundly wise. "You know, Cassandra, I've been meaning to talk to you about some of the decisions you've been making lately. Blake, would you excuse us for just a moment? I need to have a little chat with your aunt about some concerns I've been having." Cassandra felt trapped between Blake's financial manipulation and Jade's impending interrogation about her personal choices. She knew that Jade had strong opinions about how widowed women should behave, and those opinions rarely aligned with Cassandra's desire for independence and personal fulfillment. "What kinds of concerns, Jade?" Cassandra asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Well, for instance, I heard from someone that you've been taking art classes here at the community center, and there are rumors that you might be interested in dating again." Jade's voice carried the tone of someone discussing scandalous behavior rather than normal activities for a healthy adult. "I'm just worried that you might be making some decisions that aren't entirely appropriate for someone in your position." The word appropriate was loaded with judgment and the implication that Cassandra was somehow failing to meet expected standards of behavior for a widow in her late 60s. "I don't see anything inappropriate about taking art classes or being open to companionship," Cassandra replied, feeling her frustration mounting. "These are normal activities for someone my age." Jade's expression suggested that she disagreed fundamentally with Cassandra's definition of normal. "Oh dear, I'm not criticizing you. I'm just concerned that you might not be thinking clearly about how these choices reflect on our family. People talk, you know. They notice when a widow starts acting like a teenager again." The comparison to a teenager was deliberate and insulting, designed to make Cassandra feel foolish for wanting to engage with life, rather than retreat into the passive role that Jade apparently expected from her. "I'm 68 years old, Jade, not 16. I think I'm capable of making my own decisions about my social life and hobbies." Cassandra's voice carried a firmness that surprised even her, but Jade seemed unfazed by the pushback. "Of course you are, dear. I'm just saying that sometimes it helps to have family members who care about you enough to offer guidance when you might be veering off course." Jade turned to address some of the other seniors who had been pretending not to listen to their conversation. "You all know Cassandra, don't you? She's been going through some changes lately, and we're all just trying to make sure she's making good choices for herself." Cassandra felt a flush of embarrassment and anger at being discussed as if she weren't present. Jade was systematically undermining her reputation and autonomy in front of her friends, disguising the attack as loving concern. "I don't need guidance about my personal choices, Jade. I need family members who respect my independence and celebrate my happiness rather than questioning every decision I make." Blake, who had been watching this exchange with growing interest, decided to rejoin the conversation. "You know, Aunt Cassie, maybe Jade has a point. Maybe you are going through some kind of phase right now, and that's why you're being so resistant to helping family members who need your support." Blake was now aligning himself with Jade's undermining tactics, using her questioning of Cassandra's judgment to support his own financial agenda. The combination of Blake's guilt manipulation and Jade's systematic undermining created a perfect storm of emotional pressure that would have broken down many people, But Cassandra had reached a point in her life where she recognized these tactics for what they were: attempts to control her through shame, guilt, and manufactured doubt about her own capabilities. Blake, Jade, I think this conversation has gone far enough. Blake, I'm not going to invest in your restaurant venture, and that decision has nothing to do with my mental state or my other life choices. Jade, I'm perfectly capable of managing my own social life and hobbies without family supervision. Cassandra stood up from the table, her coffee cup trembling slightly in her hand, but her voice remaining steady. I came here today to enjoy time with my friends and participate in activities that bring me joy. I'm not going to let anyone, family or otherwise, turn my sanctuary into a place of stress and conflict. She looked directly at both Blake and Jade, her expression serious but not unkind. I love you both, but I will not tolerate being manipulated, guilt-tripped, or treated like a child who can't make her own decisions. Blake's face flushed with anger at being called out so directly in front of other people. Fine, Aunt Cassie, I can see where your priorities are. I hope your art classes and your new social life make you happy, because don't expect your family to be there for you when you need us. The threat was barely veiled, suggesting that Cassandra's refusal to comply with his demands would result in withdrawal of family support. Jade nodded approvingly at Blake's harsh words, as if Cassandra had brought this conflict on herself through her unreasonable behavior. I think I'll take my chances, Cassandra replied calmly, though her heart was pounding. I'd rather have a smaller circle of people who truly care about my well-being than a larger group who only value me for what I can provide them. She gathered her purse and walked away from the table, leaving Blake and Jade to exchange glances of mutual support in their shared judgment of her choices. As Cassandra walked toward the art room where her watercolor class was about to begin, she felt a mixture of sadness and relief. The sadness came from recognizing how toxic her relationships with Blake and Jade had become, and the relief came from finally standing up to their manipulative behavior. She realized that the community center had served as the perfect testing ground for her new boundaries, showing her that she could maintain her dignity even when facing coordinated emotional attacks from family members. This story illustrates two of the most common types of toxic family members that seniors face regularly. First, we see Blake representing the guilt-trip manipulator, who weaponizes childhood memories and family obligations to extract financial resources from older relatives. These individuals have perfected the art of making their financial problems seem like family emergencies, and they specifically target seniors because they assume older adults will be more susceptible to guilt-based manipulation. Second, we witness Jade embodying the undermining overseer who systematically erodes confidence and autonomy while disguising control as loving concern. The guilt-trip manipulator operates by creating artificial urgency around their requests, making the senior feel selfish for having financial security while they struggle. They use phrases like, "After everything we've been through together," and "I thought you'd want to see me succeed," to transform reasonable financial boundaries into acts of family betrayal. They often perform their manipulation in public settings, hoping that social pressure will force compliance when private pressure fails. The undermining overseer uses a different but equally damaging approach, questioning every decision the senior makes while presenting themselves as the voice of reason and family values. They attack the senior's judgment, confidence, and autonomy by suggesting that normal activities are inappropriate or concerning. They often recruit other family members to their cause, creating a sense of family consensus against the senior's choices. Both types of toxic relatives share common characteristics that make them particularly dangerous to seniors' emotional well-being. They refuse to accept no as a valid answer. They escalate their tactics when initial approaches fail, and they ultimately threaten withdrawal of family connection if their demands aren't met. They prey on the senior's desire to maintain family harmony and their fear of being isolated from relatives. The key to dealing with these toxic family patterns is recognizing them early and responding with clear, firm boundaries that don't leave room for negotiation or manipulation. Seniors like Cassandra who successfully resist these tactics understand that protecting their peace and autonomy isn't selfish. It's essential for maintaining dignity and mental health in their later years. If you're recognizing these patterns in your own family relationships, please subscribe to our channel for more strategies on maintaining your independence and peace of mind as you navigate these challenging dynamics. While Cassandra's experience shows how toxic relatives can invade even our safe spaces, let me share another story that demonstrates how these destructive patterns can completely take over what should be joyful family gatherings. Vincent, a 72-year-old, retired engineer, had been planning his annual family barbecue for weeks, carefully preparing his backyard and looking forward to hosting relatives he hadn't seen in months. He had always taken pride in his ability to bring people together, to create an atmosphere of warmth and connection that reminded everyone why family mattered. Vincent's home had been the traditional gathering place for celebrations for decades, and he cherished the role of family patriarch even as his children had grown and started families of their own. This particular Saturday promised to be perfect, with ideal weather and a menu of all his relatives' favorite dishes that he had spent days preparing. Vincent was in his kitchen, putting the finishing touches on his famous potato salad, when he heard a car door slam in his driveway, followed by the rapid clicking of high heels on his front walkway. Skye, his daughter-in-law, always arrived early to family events, though Vincent had learned over the years that her early arrival was rarely motivated by a desire to help in ways that he actually wanted or needed. "Vincent, I'm here," Skye called, out as she let herself in through the front door without waiting for him to answer. She appeared in the kitchen doorway carrying several large grocery bags and wearing the determined expression that Vincent had come to recognize as a warning sign of impending reorganization. "Hello, Skye," Vincent replied cautiously, wiping his hands on a dish towel and wondering what she had brought with her this time. Skye set her bags down on his counter with authority and immediately began unpacking what appeared to be an entirely different menu than the one Vincent had spent days preparing. "I stopped by the organic market on my way over because I was worried about some of the food choices you mentioned on the phone. You know how important it is for people our age to be mindful of sodium and preservatives, especially when we're cooking for a group." Vincent felt his stomach tighten as he watched Skye begin arranging her alternative ingredients across his carefully organized workspace. "I appreciate your concern, Skye, but I've already prepared most of the food for today," Vincent said, gesturing toward the refrigerator where his dishes were chilling and the counter where his marinated meats were ready for grilling. Skye glanced at his preparations with the kind of expression one might use when discovering spoiled food, shaking her head with theatrical disappointment. "Oh, Vincent, I can see you've put a lot of effort into this, but we really need to think about everyone's health and dietary restrictions. Mrs. Patterson from next door told me she saw you buying regular hot dogs at the grocery store." "Regular hot dogs, Vincent. Do you know what's in those things?" Vincent felt his jaw clench as he realized that Skye had been discussing his grocery shopping with his neighbors, treating his food choices as if they were the concerning behavior of someone who couldn't be trusted to feed himself, let alone others. "I've been buying hot dogs for 70 years, Skye. I think I can manage to select appropriate food for my own family barbecue." His voice carried a note of firmness that he hoped would discourage further criticism, but Skye seemed to interpret his resistance as evidence that she needed to be more assertive in her intervention. "I know you think you can handle everything yourself, Vincent, but sometimes we all need a little help making better choices," Skye replied, her tone shifting to the slow, deliberate cadence that Vincent had noticed she used when she thought he wasn't understanding something properly. That's why I brought some turkey burgers and organic vegetables, much healthier options that everyone will appreciate, even if they don't realize it at first. She began opening his refrigerator and rearranging the contents to make room for her. Alternatives, moving his carefully prepared dishes around as if they were obstacles to her superior planning. "Sky, please don't rearrange my refrigerator," Vincent said, his voice carrying an edge of frustration that he tried to keep under control. "I have everything organized exactly where I need it for today's cooking." Sky paused in her reorganization and turned to face him with the patient expression of someone dealing with a difficult child. "Vincent, sweetie, I can see that you're getting a little overwhelmed by having so many people coming over. Why don't you just let me take care of the food preparation? You can focus on setting up chairs and making sure the yard looks nice." The suggestion that he was overwhelmed by his own family gathering stung deeply, especially since Vincent had been hosting larger events than this for decades without assistance or complications. "I'm not overwhelmed, Sky. I'm perfectly capable of preparing food for my own family barbecue. I've been doing this longer than you've been alive." Vincent's reference to their age difference was intentional, a reminder that his experience should count for something in his own home. But Sky seemed to interpret his assertion of capability as further evidence of his need for management. "Of course you have experience, Vincent. No one's questioning that. But things are different now. Food safety standards have changed, dietary awareness has evolved, and we all need to be more careful about these things as we get older." Sky continued, her refrigerator reorganization while talking, effectively ignoring his request to stop. "I'm just trying to make sure everyone stays healthy and happy today. That's what family is for, right? Looking out for each other." Vincent watched helplessly as Sky began taking over his kitchen workspace, moving his prepared dishes aside to make room for her own cooking project. She had successfully reframed her takeover as caring assistance, making it nearly impossible for him to object without seeming ungrateful or unreasonable. "I've invited people over for the food I prepared, Sky. They're expecting my potato salad and my barbecue sauce, not organic alternatives." His attempt to maintain control over his own menu was met with a patronizing smile that made him feel like a child arguing for candy before dinner. "Trust me, Vincent, once they taste the organic options, they'll thank us for making healthier choices for them. Sometimes we have to guide people toward better decisions, even when they don't initially. Understand why those decisions are necessary." Sky had now completely commandeered his counter space and was beginning to prepare her alternative menu while his original dishes sat displaced and unwanted in whatever corners she had deemed appropriate for them. The doorbell rang, providing Vincent with a temporary escape from the kitchen takeover. He opened the door to find his 25-year-old grandson Dex standing on the porch, dressed in an expensive suit despite the casual nature of the barbecue, and already checking his phone before Vincent had fully opened the door. "Hey, Grandpa," Dex said without looking up from his screen. "Nice house. I forgot how quaint these older neighborhoods can be. Very retro charm, you know?" The word retro was delivered with the kind of condescension that suggested Vincent's home was an amusing relic rather than a comfortable place where he had built a life. "Hello, Dex. I'm glad you could make it," Vincent replied, though he could already sense that his grandson's visit would be more about showcasing his own success than connecting with family. Dex finally looked up from his phone long enough to give Vincent a quick, distracted hug before immediately returning his attention to the screen. "Sorry, Grandpa, I'm just closing a huge deal. Work never stops when you're in tech, you know. I probably shouldn't even be here today, but Mom insisted I come to the family thing." Vincent bristled at having his carefully planned barbecue dismissed as the family thing, as if it were an obligation that Dex was grudgingly fulfilling rather than an opportunity to spend time with relatives who loved him. "I appreciate you taking time from your busy schedule," Vincent said, though his tone carried more sarcasm than he had intended. Dex seemed completely oblivious to his grandfather's irritation, interpreting the comment as genuine admiration for his professional importance. Yeah, it's crazy how in demand I am these days. My company just promoted me to Senior Development Manager, which comes with a significant salary bump and equity options that should make me pretty wealthy by the time I'm 30. Dex launched into a detailed description of his professional achievements while walking through Vincent's house, commenting on various furnishings and decorations as if he were touring a museum of outdated lifestyle choices. You know, Grandpa, you should really consider updating some of this stuff. There are some amazing smart home technologies that could make your life so much easier. I'm quite comfortable with my home the way it is, Dex, Vincent replied, feeling defensive about surroundings that had seemed perfectly adequate until his grandson began critiquing them. I've lived here for 40 years and everything works exactly the way I need it to. Dex laughed in the way that young people laugh when older adults say something they find charmingly naive. I'm sure it worked great back in the day, Grandpa. But technology has moved on. You probably don't even realize how much you're missing out on because you're used to doing things the old way. The phrase "back in the day" stung because it dismissed Vincent's 4 decades of home ownership as ancient history rather than ongoing life experience. I keep up with technology just fine, Dex. I have a smartphone, I use the internet, and I'm perfectly capable of operating modern appliances. Vincent tried to keep his voice level, but he could feel his frustration mounting at being treated like a technological dinosaur by someone who had never lived independently for more than a few years. Oh, I'm sure you do your best, Grandpa. It's just that the learning curve gets steeper as we get older, you know? It's not your fault that you can't keep up with how fast things change these days. Dex's patronizing sympathy was somehow worse than outright criticism, suggesting that Vincent's technological competence was limited by age-related decline rather than choice or preference. Like, I bet you still use a landline and probably have one of those old cable TV packages instead of streaming services. Vincent did indeed have a landline, not because he couldn't understand modern communication options, but because he valued having a reliable phone connection that didn't depend on cellular towers or internet connectivity. He also maintained cable television because he enjoyed the simplicity of channel surfing without navigating complex streaming interfaces. But Dex's assumption that these choices reflected technological ignorance rather than personal preference made Vincent feel suddenly self-conscious about decisions that had seemed perfectly reasonable until this moment. More family members began arriving, and Vincent hoped that a larger group would dilute Dex's condescending attention and allow him to enjoy the gathering he had worked so hard to prepare. However, his cousin Iris arrived with the dramatic flair that always preceded her most exhausting performances. "Vincent!" she called out as she approached the backyard, her voice carrying the theatrical anguish that had become her signature communication style. "I almost didn't make it today. You wouldn't believe the morning I've had. Actually, you wouldn't believe the week I've had, or the month for that matter." Vincent knew from years of experience that Iris's greeting was an invitation to inquire about her latest crisis, and that failure to show appropriate interest would result in escalated dramatic presentations until someone provided the attention she required. "What's been going on, Iris?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer and the length of time it would consume from his limited gathering. "Oh, Vincent, where do I even begin?" Iris settled herself into one of his carefully arranged patio chairs and immediately began the performance that would dominate the next hour of conversation. "First, my doctor wants to run more tests because my blood pressure is still elevated, even though I've been taking medication for months. Then my landlord told me they're raising my rent again, which means I'll probably have to move, but who has time to apartment hunt when you're dealing with health problems? And then, yesterday, my daughter called to tell me that she's getting divorced, which means I'll probably end up helping her with childcare while she figures out her living situation." Vincent listened politely to Iris's litany of problems, but He noticed that other family members were beginning to avoid the area where she had positioned herself. Her crisis recitations had a way of sucking the energy out of any gathering, transforming celebration into an emergency counseling session, where everyone felt obligated to provide solutions and sympathy for problems that seemed to multiply faster than they could be addressed. "I'm sorry you're dealing with so much stress, Iris," Vincent said, hoping to acknowledge her difficulties without getting drawn into a lengthy problem-solving session. "Is there anything specific I can do to help?" This question, which seemed supportive on the surface, was actually a tactical error that provided Iris with the opening she had been seeking to transform his barbecue into her personal therapy appointment. "Oh, Vincent, you're so sweet to ask. Actually, there are several things I've been hoping to discuss with family members who might be able to offer some guidance." Iris launched into detailed descriptions of her financial struggles, her health concerns, her relationship problems, and her housing situation, presenting each issue as if Vincent were personally responsible for finding solutions. "I know everyone has their own problems, but sometimes I feel like I'm drowning and nobody understands what it's like to have everything falling apart at once." Vincent found himself trapped between his genuine concern for Iris's well-being and his frustration at having his carefully planned gathering transformed into a crisis intervention session. Every time he tried to redirect the conversation toward lighter topics or include other family members in the discussion, Iris would escalate her emotional distress, making it clear that anything other than focused attention on her problems was insensitive and selfish. Meanwhile, Sky had completely taken over the food preparation and was now directing other family members in serving her alternative menu, while Vincent's original dishes remained largely untouched. Dex was holding court near the grill, regaling anyone who would listen with stories of his professional success and offering unsolicited advice about career advancement to relatives who had been working longer than he had been alive. The combination of Sky's takeover, Dex's condescension, and Iris's crisis performance had transformed Vincent's hoped-for celebration into an endurance test. As the afternoon progressed, Vincent realized that he had become a spectator at his own party. His food had been replaced, his role as host had been usurped, his life experiences had been dismissed as outdated, and his social gathering had been converted into a therapeutic intervention for someone else's problems. The relatives he had invited to strengthen family bonds were systematically undermining his autonomy, dismissing his capabilities, and exploiting his generosity. This story reveals 3 additional types of toxic family members that commonly target seniors during what should be joyful gatherings. First, we see Sky representing the patronizing controller, who infantilizes seniors under the guise of helpful assistance. These relatives treat capable adults like helpless children, speaking to them in slow, deliberate tones and making decisions about their lives without consultation. They justify their controlling behavior as caring concern, making it difficult for seniors to object without seeming ungrateful. Second, we witness Dex embodying the dismissive show-off, perhaps the most damaging type because it combines arrogance with complete disrespect for accumulated wisdom and experience. These relatives treat decades of life experience as irrelevant, outdated thinking, constantly highlighting their own achievements while dismissing the senior's capabilities as products of age-related decline rather than different preferences or approaches. Third, we observe Iris demonstrating the energy vampire, who transforms every social interaction into emotional labor by constantly presenting crises that require attention and solutions. These relatives create atmospheres of perpetual emergency that drain everyone's energy and make peaceful gatherings impossible. The patronizing controller operates by systematically taking over decisions and responsibilities while framing their behavior as necessary assistance. They use phrases like, "We need to be more careful as we get older," and sometimes we all need help making better choices to justify their interference. They often accomplish their takeovers gradually, making it difficult for the senior to identify specific moments to resist without seeming unreasonable. The dismissive show-off uses generational differences as weapons, treating technological and cultural changes as evidence that older adults are fundamentally obsolete. They constantly reference their own success and modern knowledge, while dismissing the senior's experience as irrelevant to current realities. Their condescension is often disguised as helpful education, making their disrespect seem like patient assistance. The energy vampire creates artificial urgency around their problems, presenting themselves as perpetually overwhelmed by circumstances beyond their control. They monopolize conversations and social energy by requiring constant emotional support, while rarely offering reciprocal care or celebration of others' positive experiences. All three types share the common characteristic of making family gatherings about their own needs rather than genuine connection and celebration. They transform seniors from honored family members into service providers who exist to meet other people's requirements for control, validation, or emotional support. If you're recognizing these exhausting patterns in your own family dynamics and want to learn more about protecting your peace during family gatherings, please like this video to help others find these insights. Through Cassandra's experience at the community center and Vincent's transformed barbecue, we've witnessed how 5 distinct types of toxic family members can systematically undermine the peace and dignity that you've earned through decades of life experience. These patterns aren't random personality conflicts or generational misunderstandings. They're deliberate behaviors that target your age, your resources, and your desire to maintain family harmony. Understanding these toxic types gives you the power to recognize manipulation before it devastates your emotional well-being and helps you respond with the wisdom that comes from finally seeing these relationships clearly. The first toxic type you need to distance yourself from is the guilt trip manipulator, represented by Blake's calculated assault on Cassandra's financial boundaries. These relatives weaponize your shared history, turning childhood memories and past kindnesses into ammunition for present-day requests. They create artificial urgency around their problems, making you feel selfish for having financial security while they struggle with their latest crisis or scheme. They perform their manipulation publicly when private pressure fails, hoping that social embarrassment will force you to comply with demands you've already refused. The guilt trip manipulator transforms your generosity from a gift into an obligation, making every interaction feel like a negotiation where your worth is measured by your willingness to provide resources. The second toxic type that threatens your mental health is the undermining overseer, embodied by Jade's systematic attack on Cassandra's confidence and independence. These relatives disguise control as concern, questioning every decision you make while presenting themselves as the voice of family wisdom and propriety. They attack your judgment about normal activities like art classes or social relationships, suggesting that your choices are inappropriate or concerning for someone your age. They recruit other family members to their cause, creating false consensus that your independence is actually evidence of declining judgment. The undermining overseer slowly erodes your confidence through constant criticism disguised as loving guidance, making you doubt decisions that would seem perfectly reasonable to any outside observer. The third toxic type you must protect yourself from is the patronizing controller, demonstrated by Sky's complete takeover of Vincent's carefully planned barbecue. These relatives treat you like an incompetent child despite your decades of successful independent living, speaking to you in slow, deliberate tones as if you cannot understand normal conversation. They make decisions about your life, your home, and your activities without consultation, justifying their interference as necessary assistance for your own good. They systematically replace your preferences with their alternatives, from food choices to social arrangements, while framing their control as superior knowledge about health, safety, or modern standards. The patronizing controller robs you of agency in your own life while presenting their theft as caring intervention. The fourth toxic type, and perhaps the most personally devastating, is the dismissive show-off, represented by Dex's condescending treatment of Vincent's experience and capabilities. These relatives treat your decades of accumulated wisdom as irrelevant, outdated thinking, constantly highlighting their own achievements while dismissing your knowledge as products of age-related decline. They use technological and cultural changes as weapons, suggesting that your different preferences or approaches prove your inability to adapt to modern realities. They offer unsolicited advice about areas where you have vastly more experience than they do, treating their youth as qualification for expertise in all areas of life. The dismissive show-off makes you feel worthless and obsolete, attacking the very foundation of your self-worth by devaluing the experiences that have shaped your wisdom. The fifth and final toxic type that drains your energy is the energy vampire, illustrated by Iris's transformation of Vincent's celebration into her personal crisis intervention session. These relatives monopolize every conversation with dramatic tales of their health problems, financial struggles, and relationship conflicts, turning family gatherings into exhausting therapy sessions where you're expected to provide constant solutions and sympathy. They compete for attention by escalating their emotional distress whenever. Focus shifts away from their problems, making it impossible to enjoy positive conversations or celebrations. They create atmospheres of perpetual emergency that leave everyone feeling drained and obligated to prioritize their needs over genuine family connection. The energy vampire transforms every interaction into emotional labor that benefits only them while depleting everyone else's capacity for joy. Protecting yourself from these 5 toxic types isn't selfish. It's essential for maintaining the dignity, peace, and mental health you deserve during your golden years. Life after 60 should be about surrounding yourself with people who celebrate your worth, respect your independence, and appreciate the wisdom you've gained through years of experience. You have the right to set boundaries with relatives who consistently diminish your peace, regardless of their relationship to you or their justifications for their behavior. The question now is, how will you apply these insights to your own family relationships? What boundaries do you need to establish with relatives who treat you as a resource rather than a person worthy of respect? Which family gatherings and interactions are draining your energy rather than enriching your life? You have the power to choose relationships that honor your dignity and the wisdom to recognize when blood ties have become chains that bind you to people who refuse to see your true worth. Your golden years are meant to be golden, not tarnished by people who exploit. Your desire for family connection, the courage to protect yourself from toxic relatives, is the same courage that has carried you through decades of life's challenges. And it's time to use that strength to create the peaceful, dignified life you've earned. If this message has inspired you to reclaim your peace and set healthier boundaries with difficult family members, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more wisdom on navigating life's later chapters with grace and strength.